Hey, George Freestone. I'm back to tell more of the story regarding our baseball journey. And this installment is going to take us to Camden Yards. We've been there twice, my wife Carol and myself, both, however, in 2014, which was a significant year for the Orioles. If you take a look at my cap, you'll see it commemorates the 60th anniversary of the Orioles in Baltimore. They came from St. Louis. They were the Browns in 1954. And my shirt also commemorates that event. And 1954 is kind of a significant year for both my wife and myself. It's when we were born. Now, Camden Yards is quite the ballpark. It is the first that was really a retro park. And the backdrop in Zoom here for me is the warehouse that preceded Camden Yards there and was in a state of some disrepair as they were thinking about what to do for replacing Memorial Stadium, the prior stadium for the Orioles, with a new one. And I'll tell a little bit of that story as we get into the slides, but let me share and then let me maximize this. Okay. Camden Yards was, as the first bullet says, was the first retro park. And it's got quite a story about both what type of a park it was going to be, where it was going to be located, and then once the downtown area was selected, what to do with the warehouse that is behind me in Zoom. And that story is told very nicely in the book that is right here. And it tells the heritage of the decisions and the trials that went on as they were trying to figure out how to replace Memorial Stadium. Now, many times when I've told this story, I've probably taken some license, but the woman that you see next to the book is Janet Marie Smith. And she, at the time that they were debating what to do for the Orioles, for their park, she was the vice president of planning and development. And the story that I've told, which may not be grounded in fact, was there was a group of men sitting around a table and they were about to build the next Kaminsky Park. And Janet piped up and said, "Hey guys, how many times are you going to do the same thing and expect a different result?" Well, I don't suspect that necessarily took place, but I can tell you that in both the book and other reading about Camden Yards, Janet had a significant influence. She's not an architect, but she had significant influence on many of the decisions about what to do with the replacement and with the eventual construction of Camden Yards. But I also believe she was gracious in many of her comments where she said, look, this was a team event, and I alone don't deserve significant credit for this. It was a team event. So, quite a nice story, quite a beautiful park. And you can see the park here in left center with the warehouse in the backdrop. That's from one of our two visits. We actually went twice to Camden Yards, both interestingly in 2014. In April, near the beginning of the season, Carol had business in Baltimore. I tagged along, and one of the things we did was check out an Orioles game. This game and the game that you see the box score for down here, the 7-6, was actually a little bit later in the season. It was in July of 2014. And as that first bullet indicates, we had some of our kids with us as well. We had our daughter and her husband from Chicago, and you can see them with Carol in the dugout on our field tour. And this was one of the stadiums that we did invest in a tour that would be a guided tour with a staff of Camden Yards, the Orioles, guiding us around and sharing with us the rich history of the Orioles as well as what Camden Yards has to offer. Okay, second bullet. I'm going to talk a minute about these two pictures here on Utah Street, which is right in between the right field fence and the warehouse. There are a series of bronze placards either on the street itself, or this one actually is on the wall. And just a couple of things about those placards. This large one is for David Ortiz, and you can see it is for 423 feet. Need a little help there with the sunglasses on. But anyway, that is not the longest. We'll talk about those in a minute. In 2020, there were over 100 markers for players that had hit a home run that had gone onto Utah Street. Of those, the Orioles had 46. The visitors had slightly more. At that time, the Orioles players with the most was Chris Davis. The furthest on the street was from a Montreal Expo, Henry Rodriguez in 1997 for 443 feet. However, this little insert right here is actually on the warehouse wall, and it wasn't hit in a regular game. It was hit by Ken Griffey Jr. in the 1993 Home Run Derby for the All-Star game, and that was 465 feet. So, a lot of placards there, a lot of history about the game, and indeed, we had Big Papi here. Now, the rest of that bullet says something about local boy Mike Trout. The Angels played the Orioles, and Mike Trout, I think, grew up in the Philadelphia area, except in New Jersey, hence that particular comment. And speaking of the game, this game, the one in July, not the one in April, went to extra innings. And in the bottom of the 12th, Manny Machado, while he was still an Oriole, had a walk-off home run to win the game and cause the celebration that you see here at the end of the game. Okay, as part of the field and ballpark tour, we went past the 1983 World Series trophy, and my trivia question there was, okay, who was the National League team? Well, I believe it was Philadelphia's Phillies. And in that 1983 series, the Orioles won the series 4-1. The Phils took the first game, and then from there on out, it was all Orioles. And it was the first time since 1956 that in a World Series, no air travel was used. They just bussed in between New York and Baltimore. So the series answer right there is the Philadelphia Phillies. Now I have two other pictures here that are a little bit reminiscent of some earlier portions of these discussions in these earlier episodes. As you know, I'm a Mets fan, and as you know, the Mets in 1969 won the World Series versus none other than the Orioles. And you see here the 1969 American League flag for the Orioles. You also see the American League victories over here. And you'll not notice the World Series over on the left there because the Mets won that particular series. Okay, one of the things we saw, in addition to a lot of the numbers that are commemorated very nicely, and you can see Jackie Robinson's here, is we saw a series of statues, and there's only a small fraction that I've depicted here. I actually have three, two that are actually in the ballpark area. Um, this is Brooks Robinson, and then this is Babe Ruth. And you might say, okay, but I thought Babe Ruth was a Yankee. Why do we have a statue for him in Baltimore? Well, he was born in Baltimore. He played for the Orioles very briefly, but this was before the Orioles were a major league team. It was a minor league team that Babe played for. He picked up his name, his nickname, Babe, in Baltimore. And there's also now a Babe Ruth museum, which we went to, and this particular image of Babe is at that museum in Baltimore. So those are a couple of reasons why the statue for Babe Ruth is there. I will point out that there is a second Brooks Robinson statue. This one was actually across from the Hampton Inn, a little bit further removed from the ballpark, but still very close. And you can see that, I think you can see that there is a golden glove that is on Brooks' left hand there. Okay, so next, I'm going to take just a bit of a bye and talk about the Iron Man. Of course, Cal Ripken Jr., his father also played for the Orioles, but Cal Ripken Jr. Has a record that I don't think will ever be broken again. First of all, this 21-31 is one more consecutive games played than Lou Gehrig had, who had held the record, I think, for like 56 years. Well, in 1995, Cal Ripken Jr. actually eclipsed Lou Gehrig's record of 21-30 consecutive games by one, and hence this tribute to him, which we also saw on the stadium tour. But the cover of Sports Illustrated there captures Cal with the Iron Man nickname for his recognizing his feat there. Okay, let's see, what's next? Well, I've already talked about the Babe Ruth Museum. Um, there is a very fascinating railroad museum in Baltimore. Um, Baltimore is known as, I think, one of the formative cities in establishing rail traffic throughout the United States. And this particular museum, the B&O Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum, is at what used to be the Montclair Station, which, according to my research, is the birthplace of rail passenger service, which began in 1830. Um, Now, this very attractive engine that you see here, number 147, is a 10-wheeler, and it's named Thatcher Perkins. One thing that's interesting about it is in 2003, the roof of this roundhouse, these engines are stored inside a roundhouse, collapsed, or half of it collapsed with a significant storm, causing significant damage to this and other engines. Okay. All right, I've been holding out on this particular point, but Camden Yards is my favorite stadium, ballpark, whatever. And the reason for that is twofold, I would say. It was the first retro ballpark that many others have since followed. And it was a great team effort to actually come up with that particular design. And I've talked a little bit about this book and Janet's role in that regard. Okay, just a few other things to comment on. I have picture albums. These are active links. So if you go to the presentation, not this YouTube recording, but if you go to the presentation, you can click on these and it will take you to several hundred pictures for each of these different visits, both to the ballpark and to the Baltimore area. Camden Yards is very close to the Inner Harbor, and this is a interesting shot of the Constellation, the USS Constellation, that is moored at the Inner Harbor. And so you've got lots of pictures that you can take a look at there. Now I'm going to move me from here over here because in the top corners, right and left of this slide, you'll see two pictures of a bridge that I don't think we would be talking about if not for some events on March 26th of 2024. From prior trips to Baltimore, either from, I think I took one of these shots from Fort McHenry, the other one from the Inner Harbor area, you can see the Key Bridge in those two shots. And in this one, you can see a large tanker proceeding through and into the port of Baltimore. But the events of March 26, 2024 actually unfortunately brought that bridge down. So it collapsed and is in the process of being rebuilt. That is an interesting aspect of many of these chapters. I have found that over time, I need to update some of what is on each of these slides with current events that affect what we have to talk about. I will close this particular segment by highlighting just this distinctive tower attractively lit up at about 5 of 9 one evening in Baltimore. This was taken, I think, from the Inner Harbor, actually. And that is, as the last bullet says, the Bromo Seltzer Art Tower and clock. And I believe it says Bromo Seltzer on the clock. But that's it for our trip to Baltimore and back. I think next stop will be the Reds and the Great American Ballpark. And once again, I want to thank everybody for their attention, comments, and feedback about these sessions. Thank you.